Right, hello everyone, and welcome to the first Fireside Chat of 2021. Our theme tonight is Decoupling Research Impact and Education Excellence within Universities for Better Outcomes. My name is Mandy Mock, and I am the founder and CEO of AppliedHE. AppliedHE is the new kid on the block as an international higher education service provider that specializes in evaluation, branding, marketing, and professional networking solutions. This fireside chat is moderated by our very capable and always charming Mrs. Winnie Ely, partner at Education Insights UK. Thank you very much, and thanks also to our speakers from Malaysia, Singapore, the US, and Australia. Now, without further ado, allow me to hand over to Winnie. Thank you, Winnie.
Thanks, Mandy. Welcome to the first AppliedHE Fireside Chat in 2021. For delegates who joined us last year, welcome back. For delegates who join us for the first time, a very warm welcome. The AppliedHE Fireside Chat brings to you a global panel of knowledgeable and passionate speakers on topical issues that we care about, but limited by open and trusted platforms to have a good conversation. It is designed to be cozy, relaxed, engaging, and at the same time serious, fun, provocative, thought-provoking, and blue sky. Most important of all, we welcome a lively interaction between our speakers and participants. Some of you have posted your questions when you registered. We shall invite you to ask your questions once each of our 4 speakers have had their 3-minute monologues on that topic. The premise that education excellence cannot be achieved without informed by research is well received. This fireside chat topic on decoupling research impact and education excellence within universities for better outcome builds on the above premise. It aims to explore and unpack practical and pragmatic ways to decouple research impact and education excellence within university for better outcomes from student experience, graduates' employability, universities' reputation, community engagement, local economy, alumni, staff, deep focus in priority research areas, education excellence to national university system. At the Education Insight, which we have the pleasure to sponsor the Fireside Chat, our recently developed Global Engagement Index measures areas of universities' global engagement and their success in both teaching and research. Examples include, but are not limited to, international students' continuation rates, students' graduate outcomes and satisfactions with their studies, international themes within the curriculum, capacity building activities, international collaborations, environmental impact. Our speakers today are encouraged to use an evidence-based approach with reference to individual institutions, national education systems, and international data set to inform the conversation we're going to have. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Elizabeth Lee, CEO of Sunway Education Group in Malaysia. Under Elizabeth's leadership since 1992, the Sunway Education Group has developed from a single institution to a dynamic group of 16 institutions, currently empowering approximately 30,000 students. Malaysian Qualification Agency Council member, Elizabeth holds a Master of Philosophy in Education from University of Cambridge. Aside from many honors, awards, and accolades, Elizabeth was esteemed by the Central Media Group as Educationalist of the Year in 2019. Elizabeth, please.
Thank you very much, Winnie, and it's lovely to be invited together with such esteemed speakers on the same panel on a topic which is very close to my heart. And I'm so happy that it's about decoupling both research impact and education excellence. Earlier on, you said, Winnie, that, that research, you alluded to research being seen as being better than the teaching side or the education side, if I can put it that way. I mean, to say that is like saying men are better than women or the other way around. It's not right. To me, both research and teaching or education, they are the yin and yang of what university excellence is all about, right? You really cannot have one, well, I wouldn't say you cannot have one without the other, because colleges which are not so interested in research do very well as teaching institutions. And so, but the fact remains that they both have their important bits to contribute. As I always say, there can be no research, sorry, there can be no future if there's no research. So research is extremely important. But at the same time, when I ask myself, what do the students come to us for? Really, at the end of the day, they may have looked at our ranking, thanks to Mandy and the wonderful work that she did with QS. Everyone's talking about rankings and use it as the gold standard as to what a university of excellence is all about. Thank you, Mandy, but it's in a way doing a disservice to those who teach very well, because students at the end of the day really, once they're in, don't really care, I think, so much about your professors' publications, for example, except the professors who may be teaching them, or it has some direct impact into what they are studying. But they care about the fact that the delivery is good, that they understand the people who are teaching them, and they're taking something important back that is thought-provoking, and they have learned. So to me, as such, when you talk about decoupling, I think it's important in this sense to place importance on both of them, but separately. So I would like to look at your decoupling of research impact and education excellence as meaning just that, right? Just as the wife has a lot to bring to the table as the husband has. Very much like that. So I think my 3 minutes is up, and I should also listen to the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's like a partnership then. Our second speaker is Professor Decoupling, who is the Vice Chancellor of Carolina University. Before commencing his academic career, he was an investment banker on Wall Street and a lawyer. Sandeep was educated at Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, and at the National Law School of India. His legal research has been published in journals including Georgetown, Northwestern, Columbia, etc., whereas his business academic research has been published in journals such as European Accounting Review. Sandeep is a regular media columnist and has also appeared on a variety of TV and radio shows as an expert commentator. Sandeep, please.
Thank you so much, Winnie. Again, let me thank Mandy and Peter also for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. It's wonderful to see all of you and many others who are here. Obviously, this is a very complex topic on which I think it's hard to do justice in 3 hours, let alone 3 minutes. So I'll try to at least touch or scratch the surface of some topics which can provoke more conversation and discussion and potentially further work. So firstly, I was thrown by the word decoupling. I mean, so why did you choose decoupling rather than uncoupling, for example? I mean, is there a difference, or are they the same thing? I mean, to me, probably it's better to use uncoupling rather than decoupling, because it's at least slightly suggests a little more positive note rather than the very clear separation kind of implication that comes from decoupling. And as Winnie rightly said, there is an implicit understanding that these are kind of dyads or dichotomies between research and teaching, although very curiously, the title doesn't say teaching, it says education outcomes, which I think I would interpret much differently to just saying teaching outcomes. So considering that the topic suggests education outcomes rather than teaching outcomes, firstly, I don't know that there is a necessary conclusion that the two are mutually exclusive, because education ought to, in an ideal world, include research as well as teaching. Whereas if the topic had been more narrow, perhaps the implication would have been necessary. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think it's crucial to note that the decoupling is, again, not automatically assumed. So in some contexts, maybe there is room to decouple because they have become so entrenched and joined together. In some universities, especially the more elite research-based universities, there is an assumption that it's really about research and not so much about teaching. And in those places, maybe you do need to decouple to ensure that both are served adequately. In other places, perhaps you need coupling, right? So it may not be decoupling as an automatic concept, because in many institutions which are primarily teaching based, there's never been a coupling of research and teaching. So to start with, to have really good education outcomes, I would suggest that you need to first couple research with teaching to provide really good educational outcomes in those universities where the two are not joined at the hip, so to speak. So again, that's a topic for conversation. Thirdly, I would suggest that we need some sort of more objective, universal, or at least consistent definitions of what constitutes good educational outcomes. It is by no means certain that all universities or all colleges or even all countries or even all states within countries agree as to what these educational outcomes ought to be. So unless you have standardization or some degree of harmony, it's very hard to know which goalposts you're aiming for. Just imagine people playing soccer where goalposts are small in some places and larger in others. You wouldn't know which goal, where you'd be shooting at, right? So you need to have uniform, consistent targets to be able to measure outcomes so that then you know what is good versus what is bad. So I think all of these things need to be developed before we know whether we should couple or decouple or uncouple as the context requires. And finally, my point being, everything is contextual in education. What works in some countries or some contexts will not work in others. So it's important to not have just sort of very superficial level metrics. We need to know what works for each country and each system, and then design metrics according to that. So I'll stop there since my 3 minutes are up, and then we can. Thank you again.
Thanks, Sandeep. The topic is now officially couple, decouple, and uncouple research and education excellence. But we'll explore more about that in the Q&A. Thank you. Moving on, we Miss Zani van Wijk. Do not shoot me if I pronounce it wrong. Zani has an MSc from Sheffield Hallam University in the UK with, listen to this, mathematical statistics, advanced analytics, and data science. And with that, she has 30 years of data and analytics experience with specialism in the development and implementation of comprehensive data and analytics strategies, focusing on advanced analytics and data science platforms. Her team utilizes the latest innovations in data and what's possible with analytics and AI to accelerate their data and analytics transformation agenda. Very topical. Insights extracted from data collected across the student's learning life cycle are therefore applied to develop predictive models to be used for targeted intervention in time to make a difference, rather than months or years later. Zani, please.
Thank you, Winnie. Yes, so I'm definitely going to approach this from a data analytics perspective, and I'm not the subject expert on this topic, you guys are, but it's my job to listen and to understand how we can contextualize those data sets and deep, as you refer to, in order to strategize and plan. So much has changed over the last year, including the value of data analytics in organizations and how it's becoming an incredibly valuable resource in today's digital age. Now, I think what many people have learned and many organizations have learned over the last years, that data analytics doesn't only have to be a dashboard or a report to look at trends. It actually can be used to help you plan and strategize. But you need to know, to Sandeep's point, what those common methodologies are, or what's our universal measures that we're working towards, and then by integrating the various data sets, contextualize it in such a way that you can use it to strategize and plan. And I thought Elizabeth, when she referred to a partnership between your research impact and education excellence, in my mind, that's how I visualize the dimensional models that support your research impact and your education excellence. There will be common denominators between these two models. And when you strategize for the one, the context from the other might be incredibly valuable as you strategize and plan. So many of these strategies and plans, once you know what the measures are, what the methodology is, and how you can maybe plan in order to reach certain targets or benchmarks that you've set for yourself, by having a predictive model in place, you will be able to have those targeted interventions to change the track of how you tracking against those measurements in time and not after the fact. And I think data analytics can play an incredibly valuable role in this regard. I know from a research impact perspective, fantastic models has been built and implemented. Winnie has seen one, I know. And from a student intelligence and all that education excellence component as well, very valuable models has been built. It's now to take that next step and building those predictive analytics on top of these dimensional models, where I think whether it's decoupled, if you want to strategize, decoupling your research impact education excellent, or if you're an organization that prefer to do it together, these models should support both options for you. Thanks.
Fascinating. We shall explore what universal objective measures or definition, as Sandeep said earlier, of good teaching or educations are, because why aren't we having them? Last but not least, our speaker is Peter Stick, who is the Chief Analyst and Editor at AppliedHE. He previously worked for QS Singapore office. Prior to that, he worked in higher education, both as an administrator and a lecturer at universities in the Netherlands and South Korea. He's currently pursuing his doctorate in economics of technology and innovation at Delft University of Technology. Peter, please.
Thank you so much, Winnie. And it's really a pleasure to be speaking at one of these fireside chats for the first time. So it's very exciting. I wanted to basically address 2 points. The first one is, what do we mean by research? The second, and why? And the second one is, how do we evaluate it? Now, the fact that research and education should be combined, we kind of seem to agree on. The question is, what should we research? Maybe research is more relevant for graduate studies. Maybe it's far less relevant for professional degrees where we want industry experience, let's say in medicine, in law, in business. And there's also a distinction between new to world research versus new to community or new to market research. If you're not doing the cutting edge of world research in a certain country, it could still be incredibly relevant research to the local community. You might be helping local farmers implement new farming techniques, which are new to your region, but not new to the world. Now, I think it's also important to realize that research is very closely tied to funding. So I remember a few years back, Singaporean universities were incredibly successful in attracting MNC research. Now, what was part of their secret is that for every $1 an MNC put in, they got $1 from the government. So they had this fantastic supportive funding environment. Well, that's definitely going to help your research. I also worked in South Korea in the Seoul-Suwon corridor, where there's a lot of R&D going on. The university I worked for partnered with Samsung Electronics. Well, that's a research powerhouse. Of course, that completely changes the dimension of research if you're combining research and education. So as the previous speakers already mentioned, context is incredibly important. Now, what I would suggest perhaps is that we redefine what we mean by research. Research should lead the people who teach to have a close understanding of the sector's current challenges and opportunities. That to me seems a more reasonable definition. But the question then is, how do you organize it well in that way, nationally and institutionally? And this is where evaluation comes in. If you say research could be anything or great teaching could be anything, then basically you're saying it cannot be evaluated. And that's been a criticism on the rankings from the very beginning. So the first Asian ranking was produced in 1999 by Asia Week, and the University of Tokyo president then basically said the quality of our education and research cannot be compared with that of other universities. Such characteristics are profoundly individual and extremely difficult to quantify. Well, that's true, but no evaluation also means no accountability. So yes, it's wonderful that you say we won't want to be evaluated, but we need evaluations in many ways. Now, when we at AppliedHE created the Job Ready rating, an idea that actually predates the founding of AppliedHE, we basically wanted to have a kind of rating system that's non-prescriptive, that is based on stakeholder perception, just asking if stakeholders are satisfied. Now, there's many interesting examples that come from this data of satisfaction. It's not perfect either. In the Netherlands, for instance, there's a national student survey, and the institutions that score highest according to students are the smaller institutions in smaller cities because they have smaller scale. So that makes students happier. It's also a problematic measure. I've been evaluated by students on student satisfaction. The secret to student satisfaction is to kind of play well with the expectations of your students for the exam and just be cheerful and happy. Whether I was a good professor, I have no idea. I can tell you some of the professors I really hated in university. Thinking years back of the stuff they taught me was fantastic. So how suitable is a student to actually be evaluating academics? And then also, who are you to take that kind of conclusion, right? In the UK, you can raise student fees based on student satisfaction survey results, which is, I think, incredibly dangerous because you turn the student into a kind of consumer, a very picky one at that. And the same thing goes for if we try to do the satisfaction with research. You've got the research evaluation framework in the UK, which is basically a bunch of opinions of academics on other people's research. Again, a kind of satisfaction survey, but incredibly influential for the university. But still, we at AppliedHE, we try to go for satisfaction. But we ask the student perspective, the alumni perspective, the employer perspective, and the faculty perspective. And we hope that that gives us a fairly good idea of what's going on. So there isn't really a good solution of how to measure this all, but there's many ways in that we can try and do it. And I think also we need to get out of this idea that we, the university, do the research. You could also, instead of the academics going out into industry, industry could come onto campus, right? This is something medical schools have figured out a long time ago. They own the factory, they own the hospital. You've got the whole thing going right there. So that's something to consider. And then finally, the think about it questions, which we were supposed to come up with. I was thinking, first of all, how can a university gain control of their narrative and identity? And what's stopping them from doing so? The second thing is research really the right word to describe what universities should be facilitating in addition to learning? And the third point is, should you be evaluating research at all? Because we all seem to agree that it is a means to an end and not an end in itself. So I think that's more than 3 minutes, and I apologize for that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Peter. We have quite a lot of very rich input from individual speakers. Before we open the interaction between the panelists and participants, I'm going to ask our panelists if you have any comments, observation, clarification that you want to seek from your fellow speaker.
I don't think so. I think Peter is being purposely provocative, and I love it. I'm dying to tear him to bits, but let's hear from the other speakers.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Is there anything from Sandeep? No?
I think Peter's point about research being across that spectrum and research being a means to an end, I'm not entirely sure I agree, because research can be an end in itself as well, right? I mean, it's there's knowledge for its own sake, the pursuit of expansion of boundaries of human cognition and awareness and discovery. is a goal in itself. It doesn't have to be instrumental. So I think universities also have the ability to be pure pursuers of knowledge without any other instrumental goals. So I think that's also to be understood. I mean, the secondary question is whether that's an appropriate goal for every university, or should every university pursue such a goal? I mean, that's a second and difficult challenge to answer. But I think at least it ought to be assumed that the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake is a worthy goal.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I totally agree with that either. But it's interesting what you say, Professor, because like I said, Peter was being, purposely provocative when he said that how suitable are students in evaluating their professors, for example, and how professors are so unlikable. And that's because we always have this joke that professors profess from a very high level and they don't really come down from the pedestal or the high horses and actually speak to the students who are the ones they are trying to impart knowledge to. And that knowledge seems to be, talk about glass ceilings, going on to this, taking this imagery of the couples and the husband and wife, and even gender, the gender differences and the fact that there is a glass ceiling in academics as well, or in education or in universities as well, like whether the students can actually reach all the way up to their professors who are so high up there and seem to be talking in a different language, and also seem preoccupied with their very important research, to spend more time to actually speaking with the students and understand and getting them to appreciate the wonderful knowledge that they are creating, and so that they can be, on the same level. I think students do have that right, because at the end of the day, what are universities for? Yes, on one hand, and this is where your decoupling or uncoupling comes in. On one hand, it's to create new knowledge, which is what research is supposed to do. But as in Peter's question, what exactly is research? How do you define research? Is it looking for some philosophical knowledge, or is it looking for something new and important, a new breakthrough, whether it's in science or in the way we do things, which is a lot more applicable, and that would make a lot of sense to students. We are talking about new startups. What about the things that the students are doing in the new startups? Is that research? For example, I don't think they would have time to write it up and publish in high index journals. But then universities are being ranked according to their publications to a great extent. So we have this dilemma.
Absolutely. Zani, I'm going to call on you with your analytical listening later on. But I'm just wondering, if we were to look at clarity of redefining research, and I think both Elizabeth, Sandeep, and Peter, you touched on that. We I think, guided by ranking, unfortunately, we look at research as something very generic, but it is quite different. So if you were to redefine research, I'm going to go to Peter first. How would you do so that we can spark that conversation off? And then, if you don't mind, once you finish, Sandeep, could you come in on that definition? We're having a good conversation, so it's not about critiquing. We're just putting our heads together. Why hasn't it been done yet?
Well, I think why hasn't it been done? I mean, research is easy to evaluate in a sense, because you've got these citation indexes and citation databases, right? That's the very simple answer. So it's been easy, and we've overused it, I suppose. And other things are more difficult to measure, I would say. Now, on the question of what research or neo-research, whatever we want to call it, should be, I think it's I think it's facilitating that what is happening in the world around you is also coming into the classroom. So whether that is that you're on the cutting edge of vaccine development because that's where your students are going towards, or it's new techniques for agriculture, or the latest trends in software with data science, that those latest trends come into the classroom. I would think, and this was actually my question to Zane, like what are the best predictors of student satisfaction and quality education in your view? But I would think that if you break down those barriers between the school, let's say, or the university and the workplace where the student is most likely to end up, that is essentially the goal of it. And how you break down that barrier, that is not particularly relevant.
Yeah, just to jump in, Winnie, I think you raise a good question, but the reality is the measurements of research, at least undertaken by the national systems, such as the ones in Australia or the UK, are not at the moment restricted purely to bibliometrics and citations, right? I mean, they incorporate other measures of research, such as engagement and sort of societal impact and other non-traditional kinds of research, which is non-journal, non-book chapter, but more different contexts, particular to particular disciplines. So I think it's moved on, at least in the university sector, beyond just the bibliometrics type of research measurement. And again, even though these systems incorporate bibliometrics as just one component, as Peter said, it's still bedeviled by the fact that it's the easiest, although it's the most blunt measure, it's the one thing you can count more accurately than all the other stuff, right? I mean, every university describes its research as having great social impact in the sense of educating practitioners or leading to farmers employing techniques that are better employed in some other countries being for the first time used here, etc. Very hard to compare that and measure it, because every university claims to be doing these things. The one place where you can clearly differentiate is, of course, is the numbers in the bibliometrics and citations and so on and so forth. As everybody knows, the bibliometrics are severely flawed for many reasons, including citation cartels and herd behavior and monopolies and all. I mean, you know it all. It's adverse to certain minority groups. It's again, cartels among certain research teams. All kinds of problems persist in how people get cited. And again, citations don't account for being cited for being wrong versus being cited for being right. Both are counted as numbers. And being cited a lot for being wrong is not necessarily a good indicator that you're a good researcher. So there's all kinds of problems with it, and yet it persists as probably the single most influential factor in how people are perceived in the research world, at least at a very superficial level. So I don't know. I mean, I think the frank answer is that I don't know that there is necessarily any solutions coming anytime soon to solving this problem. Of course, the move away from just pure bibliometrics to incorporating other things like societal impact and influence and community contributions and engagement, as the Australian and the UK systems have done, are kind of an antidote to these problems, but they have their own problems. I mean, I've been a reviewer myself in a couple of these systems and read hundreds of articles which otherwise I would not have encountered as a reviewer. And I'm no wiser today than I was before that as to what constitutes good research. I mean, we all have opinions, and to extrapolate from individual opinions to sort of some sort of stamp of approval or ranking, I think is severely flawed, but it is what it is. And then to move on to the point that Peter raised about what constitutes good predictors of teaching. I mean, we know, right, even on the research on teaching and student satisfaction, there's amazing research about how women and minorities fare really badly in student satisfaction. A lot of research about how looks translate into better ratings. The better looking the academic, it seems that the higher correlation of satisfaction. The teachers who distribute donuts before class when the student evaluations are administered tend to do better in terms of how well satisfied their students are. So there's all kinds of problems even in that space. And I think, again, transferring students into a role of a consumer, when the good, which is education, is very hard to measure or assess, by the consumer at the time of consumption is severely problematic, right? So how do you know what you're being taught today in class is relevant or useful 5 or 10 years from now, which is when your career is progressing? Impossible to assess. And so I think that's why I said the outcomes, education outcomes, we need to have a better understanding as to what constitutes a good outcome. Is it, for example, graduation? Is it just the fact that in 4 years you finish with a degree? Is that a good outcome? By that outcome, the US is a horrible failure, right? Because by most metrics, the graduation rate in 4 years in the US is less than 1 in 2. The 6-year graduation average in the US is less than 2 in 3. So 2 out of 3 people get a degree, a 4-year degree in 6 years in the United States. So by that metric, 1/3 of students don't finish even in 6 years, 50% more than the normal duration. So if that's a metric, but that alone, again, is a blunt tool, because just the possession of a 4-year degree with a piece of paper does not mean that the outcome, which is education, has been achieved. So this, I mean, it's a massive topic, and I think the job that Winnie, Mandy, and you, Peter, and all of the others are doing to improve our understanding and to have better measures, I think is a tremendous service if you can provide us better clarity.
Thanks, Sandy. I wonder whether or not Elizabeth want to come in with the Malaysian perspective, or Zani want to jump in straight away. But Sandeep, the statistics from the US is, I don't have even a word for it at the moment, but it's different.
I'm glad that Sandeep actually brought up on attrition, because I think that is a very important measurement of how successful a university is or an institution is. I mean, this whole idea of education excellence, besides student satisfaction or even research excellence, if we're talking about decoupling it, and to measure that education excellence outcome itself, I mean, there are other ways. For example, employer satisfaction is very important. Are we producing the graduates that are employable? What do our employers say? Do they queue up outside our doors to wait for our graduates to graduate? Do they try to steal them before they even graduate? I mean, that's another very important, measurement. Besides that, I would say exam results. Maybe not so much internal exams, but for us, we also have our students sit for a lot of other professional exams. Whether these students actually, how well do they do in that? Then we don't have to worry about whether it's about the lecturer's charisma or distributing donuts at the beginning of the class. Which I know people do, I've had speakers, and we joke amongst ourselves, let's see whether, I can become more popular than you. Let me distribute some Kit Kats, for example. But we always say that as a joke more than anything else, because we do know that at the end of the day, the students are a lot more discerning than that. But I think, if we look hard enough, there are many ways. I mean, another way would be, which has not been done before, is should we be evaluating an institution based on their graduates in so many years' time? How many CEOs have they produced? Obviously, CEOs of startups would be much earlier, as opposed to CEOs of top corporations, which could take a good 20 years or 10 years. So maybe we should be looking at those type of measurements as well, the graduate outcome that we always talk about.
The common denominator here for me is we're talking a lot about students, but your academic staff. So some of your academic staff will do research and the teaching, where others will focus more on the research and others will only do teaching. And we did a performance expectations framework at the university where I worked, where we were able to analyze all the academic staff based on their publications, their citations, the industry impact that their projects have, the income that they generated. But we also were able to analyze the student outcomes. So those were your assessments, your internal and external assessments. And I mean, Elizabeth, you mentioned now, you know, CEOs. I'm now working with school education. And when I started at the schools, they said all the students must be A students. Now that's never going to happen. And our intent is not to have students that all become CEO. You need teachers as well, and good teachers, and sustainable
I agree.
teachers as well. So for me, it's fantastic to think everyone can become a CEO, but it's not possible. And the same with the students in our case, if it's from year K to 12, I mean, it would be fantastic to know everyone's going to be a student, but let's be realistic. Everyone's not going to be a student. And we took a step back and said, can we ensure student growth? And can we ensure student retention to make sure those students finish their education? And that's, I think, something that universities need to maybe see. If they, once a student enrolls at university, if they can keep them not only for the undergraduate, but the postgraduate and potentially research as well, and try to retain those students and give them value to stay at one institution and don't hop for the next one that looks better on your ranking scale type of thing. So I mean, the rankings is incredibly important, but I think universities needs to start looking at themselves and think, how are they going to strategize and plan, and how do they want to position themselves? And it's based on that they can make the decision whether they want to decouple research and education excellence or not. But I think the focus should be the students. And make sure that, and the academic staff. So as important as it is that you get a good feedback from the students, you need that staff as well to be content and happy and proud of the institution that they are working for. And understand that everyone can't be a CEO. If that's your intent as a university, then fantastic, go for it. But I'm afraid you most probably won't reach your target.
So can I move our conversation and the question, one of the questions here I have is education and particularly in graduate employability. I think we all agree, but whether or not you measure CEO, you measure, you know, income or salary made by students upon graduation.
Yeah.
But if it's easy, we will have done that already. And the question that comes in is, what are the barriers that we haven't been able to get the objective measures? I'm borrowing Sandeep's word now. Objective measures, universal measures, borrowing from Sani now. Why haven't we been able to agree while taking into account that actually context is important because of country variation? So first of all, what are the barriers? And then secondly, knowing the barriers, what are the ways forward?
Yeah, I'll jump in with a little bit of US background, I guess. So here, the Department of Education is seeking to do just what you suggested, Winnie, which is to provide clarity about outcomes in terms of income as one of the measures, but also repayment rates for educational loans. So these are, at least from a market perspective, good measures as to whether there is a return on investment, so to speak, in a crude sense, right? So they measure and report what the median and mean incomes are X number of years after graduation, and also report what the repayment rate is for borrowers who borrowed money to go to school. So all the way from whether students are currently paying their loans on time, whether they're behind on their repayments, or whether they're in deferment or in some way in default. So the default rates for borrowing is a critical measure in the US for how well a university is doing. So in other words, if you go to a school X and if 10% of the students there are in default, compared to University Y, where 50% of the students are in default, it suggests that people who went to University Y really could not earn enough to repay the loans that funded their education. And for that reason, other students should be on notice that you might be in the same position if you choose to go to university-wide. So that's kind of one crude kind of market-based discipline that the Department of Education here is seeking to promote. And every year they're trying to refine that methodology, because the problem is, of course, as you noted, it's not easy to do, because wages, how do you really get accurate details about individual level wages earned by students X number of years after graduation, because there's all kinds of variables, right? I mean, even if you collect the tax return data, that's subject to all kinds of quirks of the tax code that individuals might have gamed to report less or more of their income. So that's a problem. Individual family circumstances are different. I mean, there's all kinds of complexities which are kind of elided in this kind of metric, but it provides some degree of information about earnings. But the other problem also is people who are school teachers earn a lot less than, say, medical doctors. So is it automatically an assumption that's universities that produce more medical doctors than, say, school teachers are less worthy of investment or value? I mean, that's a huge problem as a social construct, right? Similarly, there's a gender imbalance in that. I mean, as Zanya, I think, hinted at, women are less likely to be CEOs, at least as currently constituted. So does it mean that because of the gender nature of management hiring, schools which have a lot of women do poorly because, of course, they have fewer CEOs to report? Does that mean that they should be less valuable or less prestigious? I mean, of course, that's complete fallacy, because it ignores the gender bias against women in many occupational contexts. Same thing with minority groups. So I think the point I'm making is it's very, very hard to get accurate information. And for that reason, I'm very cautious about bad information being used as a proxy. That's the problem we have, is poor, bad information that is heavily biased, very limited, being used to make all kinds of shortcut judgments about people, places, and institutions, which then create all kinds of misinformation loops, which perpetuate problems rather than actually improve consumer confidence. So I think we should be very, very careful until we get good data to not use bad data to make even more bad decisions.
That's a very powerful point you just made, Sandeep. Thank you. Peter.
Can I add to that? No, I think the point you made about wages is very interesting. So for our job ready rating, we've been trying to ask people, so how much do you earn? And they lowball in many countries. They say they earn very, very little. And then the employers claim they pay quite a lot. So there's a huge gap between reported earnings data from surveys like that almost makes them useless. So we're now trying to sort of ask, are you satisfied with your wages? Questions that kind of tiptoe around it. So we realized in certain countries it's culturally very insensitive. People got very upset that this question was in our survey. So just to show some of the challenges in practice. Now, not to say that we should give up or anything like that. I think I studied as an engineer originally, and basically what we were told, well, for most engineering problems, we have 5 or 6 different models. Now, if all models suggest you should go left, you should probably go left. You probably have quite a good idea. And if they're like 3 say go left, 3 say go right, well, then you have a problem. You need to probably reframe the problem a bit better. And I think that if you are going to make conclusions based on data, you better have a lot of different indicators so that you can make a more educated guess about it. And of course, getting more indicators, getting more data costs more money. It costs more time to get people to respond. If you really want to trace your study that goes year in, year out, you really need to make an effort to contact people. So I would say that if we really feel this data is important, we should probably spend the money to get it. And that's how we find out. The last point I wanted to make is that we talk about outputs, but outputs are highly, highly dependent on inputs. If your input is the top 2% of the graduating high school class, your output's going to be fantastic. So if you're measuring outputs, your inputs are crucial, because let's face it, the elite universities are trying to keep the bad inputs out.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it.
Yep. Yeah, I like that, Peter, because how many success stories have you turned from, or rather, how many failures have you turned into success stories? how on earth are you going to measure that? But that would be so important as well to, you know, how excellent an institution is, that someone who was not seen as being so good at the beginning ends up being very good at the end. So input versus output as well. But, you know, recently we had a seminar on internal and external quality at Sunway just 1 week or two ago. And one of our keynote speakers, who is also the chairperson of our Malaysian Qualifications Agency, Professor Asma Ismail, she actually said that quality assurance elements seem to prioritize the tangibles over the intangibles, obviously. And the thing is that recognizing that there is the tangibles, which are so much easier to evaluate, versus the intangibles, which are near impossible, which is what Winnie is trying to get us to say, how on earth do we do that? But there may not be an answer. So if I may cut to a chase, then why are we chasing rankings?
Because you need accountability. Some form of measurement, some form. Sorry to give a right away answer without being prompted.
Yeah.
Maybe we will have that as another fireside chat topic. Thanks, Elizabeth. We have a really, really great discussion. I'm conscious of time. And before we close, I'm offering each speaker 60 seconds to make your last word heard. So shall we do it in reverse order and give Elizabeth a break first, because she did go first. So reverse order, Peter, Zani, Sandeep, and Elizabeth. Thank you.
I would say that universities need to define what their identity is and try and find a ranking or evaluation tool that fits. It's a big world. There are many institutions out there. We can do so much more with data. So I think it's an essential part of defining an institution's mission, also designing how it should be evaluated. I think that's 60 seconds or a bit less.
I definitely agree with Peter that I think universities should look at themselves and decide where they want to position themselves. A lot of them, they collect the data they have to for legislation purposes and governance purposes. It's about integrating those data sets in order to get the context across an organization and a student life cycle and academic career. So that's very important, is to start thinking beyond just the next step, but start to think 5-10 steps ahead. That would be my recommendation.
My 2 cents is that I think we need to look very carefully as to what a university education is for and whether a university education is even needed anymore, right? I mean, the reason to say that is many employers and many industry segments already have made college degrees optional rather than mandatory. I mean, for example, some of the largest employers in the United States, including Google, Amazon, Microsoft, you don't need a college degree to get a job. I mean, it's a nice to have, and maybe it makes a difference, but they clearly have specified that it's not a precondition to be interviewed or to be considered for a job. So in that context, I think it's very important for every university to ask, what is it that it provides that is different to a certification provided by IBM or LinkedIn or Microsoft or Google or anybody else that makes it worthwhile for a student to spend 3, 4, 5 years and a lot of money sitting there, right? So unless you ask that question and decide then whether it's important to couple research with teaching, because that's a gap that you can fill, which IBM and Google cannot, or you decouple and provide really high quality teaching, which again, Google and Microsoft cannot provide. So unless you ask that question and decide which side of the spectrum you fall into, chances are the market will make you redundant. So before the market makes you redundant, ask the question and decide for yourself whether you want to couple research with teaching or whether you want to decouple research from teaching and be really good at one or the other. because otherwise I think the vast majority of people in the middle risk the chances of being redundant and not required in the market.
Right. Sorry for having spoken so much earlier on, but in closing, I just want us to bear in mind that in the pursuit of research excellence, we should not compromise on what I call the Christian Dior, which is the C and the D, which is the curriculum, that we have a holistic curriculum, and on the delivery so that our students can take back what it is that we really want to deliver to them. The idea of education is to educate and enhance lives of the masses through education by promoting equity and inclusiveness. And I believe the other thing that we need to do in education is ensure that our future talents are ready for what we have been talking about, which is this digital and technology-driven world that we have before us. Many times our professors may be teaching in a different era, but we forget that we are preparing our students for jobs that may not even exist now, and why we would need therefore to be a lot more forward thinking and to ensure that they are ready for the future that they are going to inherit. And of course, last and not least, it's the social aspect of what education is all about, and that we should look into nurturing socially responsible future generations.
What a fantastic discussion and contribution from all of you. I have really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. And we have now got new topics for the next few fireside chats, including why do we have rankings and couple, decouple, and uncouple research and education. Right, I hope everyone who joined us so far have enjoyed today's fireside chat as much as I have. We can't quite clap, but I would encourage you to put your hands together for our incredible panel members. And I'm going to address first name Elizabeth, Peter, Sandeep, and Zani. And also to the AppliedHE team, again, Peter, Mandy, and Simon behind the scene. And to all of you who actually join us from different parts of the world, wherever you are based, thank you for joining us. And Mandy, off to you.
Thank you. Great. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everyone, for the very interesting discussion. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I'd like to express my deep appreciation to our wonderful speakers and moderator for the time and contribution, and also thank you, our participants, for joining us for this fireside chat. Now, this is the first fireside chat of the year, and while this marks the end of this particular webinar, we have many more events lined up in the months to come. As you may know, Fireside Chats is a regular feature on the AppliedHE calendar. We have a fireside chat every other month and always on the first Wednesday of the month. The next episode is on the 9th of June with the theme, Can Higher Education Contribute to the World's Sustainable Development Agenda? Again, a very deep thinking topic. For this year, we will have a webinar every first Wednesday of the month with fireside chats and Squaring the Circle debate, alternating every other month all the way to December of 2021. Always on a Wednesday evening, always at 8 p.m. Singapore time. So do keep your monthly first Wednesday nights free. The next Squaring the Circle debate is on the 5th of May 2021 with the topic, International Higher Education Mobility will return to normal levels by September 2021. Very ambitious, so make sure you attend to see if this is happening. Aside from webinars, AppliedHE does a lot of other things as well. In January of this year, we launched the world's first composite world university ranking called the Rankometer. This is a new ranking that is based on one single and transparent benchmark. We all know that there has been a huge proliferation of university rankings in recent years. Students, parents, and employers simply don't know where to look for a reliable comparison of universities. But with the Rankometer, we have solved that problem by providing a transparent and reliable measure of university quality. To be precise, The Rankometer is a composite ranking of the world's 5 most influential world university rankings. If you haven't already, you can check the results at appliedhe.com/Rankometer. January was a very busy month for us. In addition to launching the Rankometer, we also launched Future, the world's first professional social media platform for the higher education sector. Future aims to connect everyone from high school to professional career to lifelong learning for the 3 E's: education, employment, and everything in between. Future is designed for higher education leaders who want to stay informed about the latest developments, events, and webinars in the sector. It also allows you to set up pages about topics that are of interest and relevance to you, discuss, comment, post news and events, and much more. You can even use Future as a teaching aid. So just watch our demos that are posted on Future webinars. Sorry, I meant the Future website. In phase 2, we will bring in more students, alumni, and employers for internships, research collaboration, and lifelong learning. In short, eventually, AppliedHE Future will include the entire higher education and career experience from leaving high school to retirement. So please sign up for Future and encourage your friends and peers to sign up too. It's free and it is the only social media you'll ever need. Extra, extra. I've been mentioning this at every webinar that we've organized, and that is we can promote your institution's news to your global target audience. So please send us your extraordinary news and press releases, or you can upload it yourself onto Future. It's yet another complimentary service from AppliedHE, so please do take advantage of it. And I'm pleased to say AppliedHE now has 3 rating systems. They serve as benchmarks and marketing tools for your institution's quest for global branding and excellence. We have the all-round job-ready rating system to evaluate the quality of teaching and learning and employability of your graduates. An English-ready rating to evaluate the quality of English language instruction in non-English speaking countries. It is also a great marketing tool for the recruitment of international students. And the online-ready rating, which helps your institution benchmark and promote its online programs and courses. So do reach out to us if you would like to learn more about how these tools can translate into affordable strategies for global branding and marketing for your institution. And last but not least, as you know, we are the new kid on the block, we still are, and we're very grateful for all the support that we can get, which is why I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge all our very supportive webinar partners: City University of Hong Kong, Airlangga University of Indonesia, Hasanuddin University of Indonesia, Changchun Christian University of Taiwan, Kirk University of Thailand, the University of Lahore of Pakistan, Chinese Cultural University of Taiwan, Pearl Academy of India, JL Education Consultants, and Education Insights UK. A big thank you for the valuable support given to AppliedHE. Right, thanks very much, everyone. However, the evening is not over yet, so please do not leave the chat room. We want you to experience a networking atmosphere that is as creative and as close as we can get to a physical networking environment. So we're going to open the room now for a few minutes. You can all see each other and perhaps say hi and introduce yourself. And you can also leave your name and contact in the chat box with a message of your intention. This is as much as we can do for now in the name of networking. So please turn on your cameras, we play some music, have a drink, relax, the room is all yours. Right, over to you now, Peter, to get the social event started.
All right, I think some of you have turned on your cameras. For the other ones, can we please ask you to do so? We'd love to see you. I'm trying to turn on the music. Oh, there we go. I think there's music now, yes. So this is what you need for a party, right? You can get your cup and yeah, this is the best we can do for the time being.
Missing is a drink.
I think we see quite a few new faces. I haven't seen a lot of you. Sifo Mbebe, I thought you were typing your name as well. You're coming in from Botswana, was it? Or
right, BW.
Oh, you're muted. You can unmute somehow. Or if you cannot unmute, it's fine too. We can just wave at you, and we're very happy to see your face. That's fine too.
Yes, I'm from Botswana.
Ah, okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anybody else want to say hello?
Okay, anybody else want to unmute and say hi? Where are you from? Ramil or Talat or Edwin? Or you just want to be a little bit shy?
Hi, I'm Edwin from Indonesia.
Ah, hi Edwin. Where in Indonesia are you from? It's a big place.
West
Yes, I'm
West
fine.
Sumatra.
Oh,
Thank
West
you,
Sumatra.
Peter.
Yeah.
okay,
How are
nice to
you?
see you. Good, good.
I'm fine. Alhamdulillah.
Good, good. Okay. Okay, I think let's just leave it here. The connections are not as smooth as we always hope for. Thank you so much, everybody, for turning on your camera. It's really nice as a speaker to see the audience and just to always see you. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again next month for the next webinar. Yeah, so please keep in touch and watch your email for the recording and everything. Okay, have a very good night or a very good afternoon in Botswana. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.